Hello, I'm Vine and welcome to Overthinking. Today's topic may sound weird, but that's because it's based on a real-life conversation that I had with a furry. If you are wondering how I casually encountered someone from furry fandom in real life, apparently it's not such an uncommon occurrence in a country where ovo is an actual word. Anyway, the convo was about fantasy creatures, during which kobolds were mentioned. Furry, being a furry, started to talk about them in a typical sexualized fashion, seeing them as cute, scaly short stacks with dragon love craze. Well, he wasn't the only one who activated himself on the kobold keyword. I proceeded to steal the spotlight and explain the simplified evolution of the kobolds as fantasy monsters with my nerd expertise, which I will also do now, as this is by itself a very fascinating topic. You see, the current portrait of the sexualized furry kobolds is mainly based on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons kobolds, where they look like short anthropomorphic red caimans with horns. They worship dragons, mining gems as sacrifice for them and their god, Kulturmak, and are presented as malicious cowardly bastards with lawful evil alignment, though many omit the last part in favor of making them comic relief creatures, as their role in the game is basically the same as goblins. This portrait is just a prettier redesign of kobolds from the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons, where they were still the same in essence, but much uglier and less anthropomorphic in terms of appearance. Almost rat-like creatures. Curious enough, they also yap like dogs. Moreover, this version of kobolds is a primary source of furry short-stack kobolds, but with much less influence than the 5th edition one. Here we have another pop culture divergence with Warcraft kobolds. It's unclear by what D&D version of a kobold they were inspired exactly, if any, but they have a mammalian appearance, specifically rat-like, with primitive minor aesthetics emphasized even more. They don't worship dragons like D&D ones, being more concerned about candles on their heads. Going back in time, we finally get to the 1st edition D&D kobolds that are reptilian humanoids with dog heads, finally explaining the origin of their dog-like yapping and mammalian connotations that we see in Warcraft kobolds. From here we get another cultural divergence, because the first portrait of D&D kobolds found itself in Japan through the genre of dungeon crawler games, supposedly by the popularity of the Dragon Quest series, but my data is quite vague on this one. Nonetheless, from the Japanese pop culture, we got ourselves an anime dog kobolds that commonly lose their mining industry references in the translation process. This of course spawned another sexualized version of kobolds, this time a dog-like monster girls, which design is for some reason pushed extremely into furry territory, instead stopping on ears and tails only, like any other typical more anthropomorphism of dogs. That's probably because monster gear genre in anime and manga focuses too much on animalistic parts of the monsters and tend to ignore their thematic core. Which is a shame, as monsters are as good as their themes, no matter if they appear in folktales, horrors, RPGs or hentai. Is this all? No, of course not. Because D&D kobolds are just a reinterpretation of kobolds from German folklore. So, what are those? House spirits, fairies, goblins, dwarves, demons, etc. German der Kobold refers to almost any supernatural spirit of miniature stature, typically mischievous or sometimes even straight up cruel. In most cases, German kobolds look like miniature people or children akin to gnomes, which also can be classified as kobolds. They often have shape-shifting abilities, but Kobold true form is always human-like. D&D just took one of the kobolds named Drak, which is a name of dragon-like friendly spirit that some kobolds took for themselves, then merged it with dwarf motifs related to mining and gave it a monster-like appearance so players would instantly recognize the creature as an enemy. Is this an American bastardization of German folklore or just an addition to the menagerie of folkloric kobolds? Dunno, I leave it for the Germans to decide. As I said, this is a simplified version of kobold evolution. Now, let's rewind a little. Remember the conversation with a furry from the start of the video? Normal people react to info dumps like this in a pretty neutral way. They might be interested, bored, annoyed, or even unfazed. But for some reason, this particular furry was gravely offended by the fact that I'm stripping kobolds from his favorite sexualized image. He got fully defensive, thinking that I'm bullying him. So, apparently, a part of a furry fandom takes mental damage from nerding out about fantasy creatures. And we can bully furries with folklore fun facts, verbally bonking the honey out of the minds. This is the info I wanted to share in this overthinking. Lastly, a question. Aren't I afraid that this suspiciously rich fandom will pipe bomb my mailbox for exposing their vulnerabilities? I live in Poland. Bold to assume that I even have a pipeable mailbox. So you don't have to worry about me and can use the info I provided as you wish. See you in the next video!